Hi, hello. Very good morning to all. I'm delighted to be the moderator for this panel discussion where we'll be talking quite a fair bit about digitalization and then about creating a digital future for ASEAN and Asia. As we have heard from SMS Dr. Janil Puthucheary, we've seen an unprecedented acceleration of digitalization as a result of COVID across various domains, ranging from remote work to e-commerce to digital payments and so on and so forth. So as we think about recovering and bouncing back from COVID, right, it is quite clear that digitalization will have a key role in all of this. In this regard, Singapore Trade and Industry Minister Gan Kim Yong recently also cited the importance of digitalization as a key enabler for recovery, especially for certain pandemic-battered sectors such as retail and so on. So it is quite clear again that digitalization will play a key role in recovery and in some cases, a matter of business survival, as mentioned by SMS Dr. Janil Puthucheary. So the SIA New Horizon report, which will be made publicly later today, has also highlighted that digitalization is not a good to have, but a must have. So in this regard, right, it will be good for us to, take the opportunity for this panel discussion to share some perspectives in terms of how they see will be the digital future for this region and so on. So with all this as a backdrop, what I thought it would be useful for me to do is invite the panelists to share their opening remarks, but take this opportunity to also answer some questions and within their response as part of that. So maybe with that, let me kick off the panel discussion with a question for Ben. So Ben, Google is clearly at the forefront in terms of driving digitalization, and SMS mentioned quite a bit of instances in terms of how Google partnered with the Singapore government. So if you can share with us your perspective in terms of what your take is with regards to the role of digitalization in all of this, and also in particular, right, what are some of the things that you think can be done more or differently to allow digitalization to move the needle a little bit more with regards to COVID recovery in the region?
Sure. Before I start, congrats to SWIA for putting on this event. I think we've all been craving a bit of human-to-human interaction. I actually forgot what it was like to speak in front of 50 people. So it's nice to see you all and be here with you to share a few thoughts on ASEAN. Maybe where I could start would be a few comments about the opportunity. SMS Janil did mention a little bit about what's happening as a result of COVID and an acceleration of digitalization. But just to go into that a little bit deeper, we actually do an annual report in collaboration with Temasek and Bain to have a look at, one, what is the overall opportunity for the digital economy in the region, but also taking stock of what's happening in real time. In 2019, the outlook was in the 200 billions range in terms of GMV. That's grown to 300 billion. We had 360 million users online across ASEAN, an incredibly large number. That grew by 40 million in 2020 alone. But just to dive slightly deeper, what was really encouraging to us, or what was very, very meaningful in many respects, was that the majority of those new users were coming from non-urban areas, certainly in Malaysia and Indonesia and Philippines. So we were seeing a nationwide penetration, much more in line with developed Western markets as it related to digital. And that was incredibly encouraging as it related to inclusion of opportunity or an inclusive approach to access to information. But then also within more evolved or developed markets, we were actually seeing 1 in 3 new digital service users coming online to those digital services that were brand new, even in a Singapore, even in a Thailand where things were a little bit more evolved. And then 90% of those users are saying that they're going to continue the usage of those services post-pandemic. So the shifts are very, very real, highly accelerated, and we believe permanent, which then has implications for business. So if I could pivot there for a moment, there's also been tectonic shifts as it relates to the head verticals within digital. In 2019, it was mid-30 billions for travel and also for e-commerce, so around $35, $36 billion each in GMV. In the space of 1 year, travel plummeted to 14 billion, and it will come back, and we all know why that's decreased. But e-commerce effectively doubled to be in the mid-$60 billion range, and we think that's going to be $170 billion in GMV by 2025. So that is a fundamental step change in the head verticals, and then we have Grab on the screen. Ride-hailing and transport and food delivery have become staples So this has really shifted things fundamentally, which has impacts as it relates to the digital natives. And there's been a lot of discussion about digital natives today. There's really, a big four that's emerged. The go-to merger in Indonesia, Grab, C Group, and Lazada, that are really shaping things across a range of different subsectors, whether it be fintech, transport, food. They're actually then now not just playing in one vertical, they're competing with each other very, very aggressively across all of these different sectors. But the implications don't really just stop with digital natives. The implications are vast, and they really cross over into traditional companies as well. As it relates to the competition within fintech, that has vast implications for banks. If I think about retail and brands, e-commerce has vast implications as it relates to them developing out their direct-to-consumer offerings. F&B industries, transport industries are all being changed at a rapid pace. And look, outside of the B2C side, I think the way that businesses operate, we all understand, it's become fully digital. So I think the answer to your question about the role of digitization, and I think it's been mentioned a few times before, look, it's no longer an option to digitize, it's an absolute imperative. All companies need to be thinking about this for all of those reasons that I just shared, a rapid acceleration and a lot of movement within these very much fundamental industries across the economy. Now, as it relates to what we do, and I'll wrap up very quickly, but the partnership aspect of talent development is absolutely critical. I think talent has been spoken about multiple times. It's incredibly important that we have the right talent and skill sets in the various countries in which we operate. And so this is something that we are doubling and tripling down on. Skills Ignition was mentioned in Singapore. It's only one of a variety of things we do across the region. So we actually committed pre-COVID to train 3 million SMEs by 2022. We're up to 2 million engaged, and we hope to cross that barrier by 2022. I'm pretty optimistic about our trajectory there. But coming back to partnerships between public and private sector, I think bringing together coalitions from government agencies with partners in the markets in which we operate is really important. So Bangkit is one particular program that we have in Indonesia, and Minister Nadiem has been a key driver of that, and that brings together big tech companies, so the Tokopedias, the Travelocas of this world, together with Google, together with universities and the government, to really think about how we can push meaningful digital talent into the ecosystem. Skills Ignition in Singapore is obviously a public-private sector partnership. We have Sapan Digital in Thailand, and we're also very heavily invested via google.org into the Asia Foundation, and we're really trying to train something in the vicinity of 200,000 small businesses and individuals. So I think the answer to the question around what we're trying to do is to try in some way be part of overcoming this challenge around skill and talent shortage. It really is the key to unlocking all of the opportunities that are emerging at a rapid rate and solving some of the imperative challenges that are facing companies around the region.
Thanks, Ben. And maybe let me turn over to Mr. Michael McDonald from Huawei Asia Pacific. So, Michael, Huawei Cloud is ranked one of the world's largest infrastructure as a service provider, and we've also heard about some of the amazing work that Huawei is currently doing in Indonesia in terms of advancing digital infrastructure in terms of 5G networks, AI, cloud computing, and so on and so forth. So, Michael, taking an infrastructure perspective, right? Please share with us your opening remarks and take this opportunity to also talk about some of the challenges and opportunities in this region from the infrastructure perspective, and what needs to be done to propel the development, and maybe by whom as well. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the invitation from SIA and as well Professor Simon specifically. We play a very large role in telecom infrastructure, and that includes all elements of mobile, fixed, cloud, as well as into the vertical markets. And I think the thing that we see as certainly a huge opportunity in Asia Pacific is the fact that even though we're still considering ourselves to be fairly digital, or at least digital aware, the reality is that there's still half of the population in this region that are not online or that are not participating in the digital economy. And our view is, or at least my particular view is really that being connected to digital is kind of like being connected to financial systems. If you can imagine tens or hundreds of years ago, if you were one of the people that did not have access to money or did not have access to a bank account, you can imagine how that would limit your business opportunity. And I think we're at a point now where we realize that the strength of the digital economy has a similar impact to how businesses and people play a role in the larger economy. We actually do have a report that we produce as well that's called the Global Connectivity Index. And through this report, what we really do is look at different economies throughout the region. And we find that there's a lot of disparity between, some countries have a huge investment in cloud and connectivity, where others are really kind of laggards in terms of, maybe not even having enough 4G LTE connectivity. And that is significantly slowing the digital development in these nations. And I think the important thing to take away from this is that we are continuing to come up with new technologies that makes connecting these rural communities more effective in terms of power usage, in terms of the reliance on things like fiber optics, which can now be replaced with 5G backhaul. So we're making it easier in terms of the technology, but at the same time, we need to be well aware of the fact that not everybody simply having access knows what to do with it. And I think this is critical. I think everybody is really aware of this at this point, but you need to know what to do with these digital services. You can't just simply connect these people, hand them a smartphone or hand them some type of a digital device and assume that they know what to do with that from a meaningful perspective in terms of participating in the digital economy. And so a lot of this goes back to education and having proper use cases that really benefit people. There's no point in connecting a rural community simply to give them access to YouTube. But if you give them access to videos that allow them to educate themselves on making their business more cost effective, or being able to connect with remote customers, or maybe doing some sort of mobile payments, all of a sudden these use cases play a particular role in driving their desire to use the technology. At the same time, we've got the skills deficit. So the reality is that we need more and more people learning how to evolve these systems, learning how to develop applications. We've got a whole bunch of really cool tools in the toolbox right now, and we need to focus on building the architects or the people that are actually going to build these houses for the future. And the reality is that that's not super easy. We put a lot of money and investment into building these ICT academies around the region, as well as putting lab facilities throughout areas like Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand. And the purpose of this is to help build ecosystems and give people sort of a playground where they can come and experience ideas from other ecosystem partners and try to come up with new models and test them and see what works, what doesn't work, and ultimately come up with new solutions and hopefully de-risk them in the process. I think something else that's probably worth noting right now is there's a significantly stronger view on the environment. And this is something that we shouldn't be taken lightly. So the good news is that ICT, for the most part, just inherently has this characteristic that we're trying to get more bits per hertz or more bits per watt. And as a result, it's a naturally greenifying technology industry. So what I mean by that is 5G is significantly more green than 4G, and 4G is more green than 3G. And that will continue to be the case, mostly because that's ultimately one of the bottom lines when the companies that buy our technology are trying to make a decision on purchasing. And I think that that's good news. So we're coming out with new solutions that can work entirely on solar PV, for example, where a cell site might consume as little as 100 watts and serve a community of 500 people providing 4G and 5G services. And this is really significantly changing the entire overall calculation of the digital economy. And then I just want to close by mentioning a little bit about policy. One of the things that's really difficult here is Asia Pacific has a variety of countries with very different maybe mindsets on security and privacy, and as well just the interworking relationships amongst themselves. And this becomes a little bit of an issue. Certainly, we don't want to completely open things up to the point that we get into some security constraints. But at the same time, we do have the ability to process data locally, and we do have the ability to form these more free information trade agreements or frameworks that allow us to more readily exchange information in a way that's more conducive to growing the digital economy. We don't want this to be a sticking point or a hurdle that slows us down. And so as a result, we need to continue to have effective policies and private-public partnerships as well. So there's a win-win solution here. There needs to be a target, there needs to be an end goal, and in a lot of cases, we need to make sure that that becomes a benefit to everybody that's involved so that we all have the same incentives to at least deliver the new phase of the digital economy. So I think I'll just close with that, and I'll take the rest in the form of questions later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. So next, I think it would be great for us to hear from Mrs. Lara Chan from Grab. So Ilaria, Grab touches many lives in ASEAN, right? I mean, as this region looks at COVID recovery and digitalization, digital talent development and upskilling will be crucial given the intense war for digital talent, right? And this is something that is very close to my heart as well from LinkedIn perspective in terms of how we see some of the potentials or challenges in terms of demand for digitally skilled workers in certain developing countries like China, Indonesia and so on, with the demand growing much faster than supply. So from Grab perspective, how do you view the digital talent landscape in ASEAN, and what would you see as some of the opportunities and challenges as well for ASEAN companies in terms of digital talent development and upskilling?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us here. I guess if I have to use a one-word answer, it is about to address the talent question. It is promising, and it is in progress. Why don't I start with telling a very quick story, because it's really about the stories of everyday people in Southeast Asia. So this is a story of Farhan. He was in the aerospace as an aircraft testing inspector, and then he moved on to oil and gas to become an inspection specialist, and then he got laid off during COVID and became a Grab driver and a delivery person during the COVID, but the income actually didn't really match his previous jobs. So he came across a program called Grab Academy, which is Grab's training initiative, and he joined the 8-month training and placement program in software development. And this is a collaboration between Grab, Microsoft, Temasek, Polytechnic, and Generation in order to offer upskilling opportunities. And Farhan learned programming language JavaScript and CSS, which I don't even know. And he's now a junior software engineer at Grab. And I think this is just one of the many, many stories that is so promising about people in this region. So now allow me to zoom out a little bit on some macro stats, especially when we look at talent right now in ASEAN. It is very encouraging. Right now in Southeast Asia, we live in a region that has higher GDP growth than China. We have a young population with almost 3/5 of the region age under 30, give or take, if you focus on specific countries. They're tech savvy, they're hungry to consume, and we have just so much growth accompanied, unfortunately, also with social gaps, which are the challenges that accompany a growing area. Mobile penetration is over 120%. And we're looking at an area, a region of over 670 million people now, double that of USA. So if we just look at Southeast Asia and the potential, it is actually some very staggering statistics. Now we see in a lot of the good work of startups and tech companies coming out of the region, embodying the talent era. We see homegrown tech firms, one of them, Gojek, C Group, etc. There's also global tech companies, right? Like LinkedIn, like Google, they all come and have a part in Southeast Asia, and they've established their bases here and find themselves building hubs in Indonesia and Vietnam. So we do see this mix of talent that they're collaborating. I'm right now dialing in from San Francisco, and many years ago, people named this term PayPal Mafia, which were ex-employees from PayPal who have gone on to found companies like LinkedIn, like Tesla, like Yelp, and I now hear that term used on Southeast Asian tech companies, the Gojek Mafia, Grab Mafia, C Group Mafia, etc. And that is actually very encouraging to me that people are now not just going to the traditional employment route, working for a company, but they're coming out and having a very entrepreneurial spirit and risk-taking spirit. That I find very promising. Now, along with these promises are definitely the challenges. We heard Michael and Ben mention the need for education to equip people to know what to do with what's being put in front of them. You can't just hand them a phone and a laptop. It requires a whole culture and mindset change. So upskilling is very, very important. So for Grab, we have actually established R&D centers in Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, and we've run also startup incubation programs through our Grab Ventures arm. And also we've worked with governments. For example, in Singapore, we've expanded training and development opportunities for the locals to help them to really thrive in the digital economy. What I personally find really wonderful about these programs is that at startup levels is not just about an exchange of numbers on Microsoft spreadsheet. It's about human to human investment, relationship. You are in the trenches together. You're figuring out the kinks together. You're trying to understand why things are just not working and you're solving it, and it's dynamic. There's no pat answer. And these organic relationships can be very transformative, but clearly with a lot of challenges as well. So as we look at this wider population in Southeast Asia starting to gain more and more access to new digital skills, and for them to participate and succeed, we think it's very important to continue investing. And so for Grab, especially in the past 2 years, seeing how important digitalization is, we have invested heavily in our partners, which include drivers, delivery partners, agents, merchants that are on the Grab platform, and to help raise their digital skills level. I just now mentioned the great and inspiring story of Farhan, but for example, if you look at Grab's partnership with Microsoft on upskilling, there are over 250,000 drivers that have already participated, over 550,000 certificates awarded. I think that's very encouraging. So just really to conclude, I think the digital talent is just starting. There's just so much to come, but we really got to handhold, especially people who are not used to this digital culture, and to especially appreciate the localized problems and culture problems, and to help them overcome them. Thank you.
Thanks, Hilaria. Very inspirational indeed. I do have one question from a virtual participant, but before I do that, right, I thought I should, kick off another question for all panelists, because as we talk about digital future in this part of the world, I think it's also important to think about the US-China competition, which is definitely a key consideration for us as we think about digitalization, right? So in a recent interview, Singapore Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan talked about a possible start of another golden age in the digital arena if the US and China would be able to sort of put away their differences and work together to build trust. And we talk so much about trust today, right? So I know we're not doing any audience poll today, but I thought it'd be good or interesting, right, to do a panelist poll. So all three of you represent companies from the US, China, and the region. And therefore, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being completely pessimistic, i.e., don't think about it, to 10 being completely optimistic. Can all of you quickly share with me in terms of how you rate the chances of this golden age scenario happening in the region and why? And maybe I can start off with Ben, followed by Michael and Hilaria in this order.
Sure. How would I put that? A numerical value on that? Look, I think we're fundamentally optimistic. I'd say an 8. That would probably be where we would sit. I think there's enough mutual interest to engage in productive dialogue on both sides of the fence. So yeah, fundamentally optimistic. I think to expand a little bit, the Southeast Asian opportunity is very exciting. I think Hilaria did a really good job in capturing some of the macro data as it relates to the opportunity. You have a growing internet population, young, rising in affluence, and in many ways shaping the future of the internet. That's certainly the way that we see it. We feel if we can build for Southeast Asia, in many ways we're going to get ahead of some of the big trends around commerce or around sort of short video consumption, payments, these sorts of things. So it's an incredibly exciting opportunity. But I think it's also and this has also been raised, but it's a very welcoming environment for investment. Hilaria did mention this as well. You have Chinese companies investing in, you have US companies investing in, you have investment coming in from all around the world. When we first the first iteration of the report I mentioned before, we felt that $40 to $50 billion was the number as it related to VC investment into the digital economy. We're already well on the way. I think 28 billion just last year, up until last year, had landed in Singapore alone. So capital is not necessarily the challenge. And many companies are really taking advantage of this. Grab is one. C Group is a valuation of over $170 billion, changes by the week. And they're really capturing the opportunity to build, to shape some of these really, interesting areas of opportunity. And that's done on the back of investments from all around the world. I do think, though, there is one really important thing to consider, and something that we feel really, really strongly about, and that is that we ensure openness of the region moving forward. I think it's important that Singapore and other countries around ASEAN, find like-minded partners in APAC that promote, interoperable frameworks around digital trade that will allow the region to flourish. I think there's, a real belief from our side that digital trade agreements provide opportunities for governments to set positive norms and just really ensure that governments don't become inward. I think governments becoming inward holds many risks. One risk would be, it really stifles the opportunity to solve for very large challenges, things like border security or economic recovery through technology. But more than that, I think it can also create a vacuum. It can create a vacuum in the absence of sort of strong leadership, that's needed to really, develop the right governing and regulatory stances for the internet. I think risk of fragmentation in APAC is incredibly acute, and having countries sort of running in a free-for-all to regulate issues around sort of content and tax and these sorts of things provides great dangers. I think, without clear mechanisms for coordinating and aligning on common principles and standards, we're not going to end up in a necessarily good place. So trade agreements for us, it provides, an opportunity to promote positive models for digital trade and ideally, values-orientated approaches to trade and human and work-centered digital trade agendas are very close to our heart. And, we'll continue to engage with various governments around the region to make sure that, we're providing our perspective on that, given the importance to the future of the digital economy in the region.
Great. So Ben goes for 8. Michael?
Sure. Okay, well, I guess I probably would have a similar sentiment that, I'm very optimistic. I think if I speak on behalf of Huawei, I would also say we're very optimistic. I think the simple view is that we're kind of at that precipice where we've invented the Legos, but we haven't come up with the models we can build with it just yet. And those models are starting to emerge, but the reality is we're just kind of coming up with the tool set to create a whole platform for new ideas. And what you would have expected if you were sitting back in North America, for example, talking about technology and how you expected ASEAN to develop versus the reality is very different. People are using technology in ways that I would have never would have thought about. We're skipping over landline phones. We're skipping over copper lines. We're skipping over optical fibers in a lot of the countries here. And that's just part of the ingenuity of the way people are using this. At the end of the day, you're never going to eliminate political motivations. But from a tech perspective, this really comes down to how you frame it. I don't think technology is inherently competitive in terms of building the digital economy. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think we're all striving towards the same goal. We recognize the same benefits in the end. But I do agree with what Ben said, and this is a very real consideration, and that's that whether it's politically motivated or whether it's some other reason, we need to be very clear about fragmentation. We need to have the same playbook. We need to play by the same set of rules. We need to have open standards. We need to agree what those standards are. And we can't shift those depending upon the way the wind blows. And I think if we can kind of get some sort of agreement in the region and more importantly globally, then I think a lot of the political noise sort of disappears and we're all sort of, we're innovating technology for the betterment of all of society in the region.
Oh, thanks, Michael. Hilaria?
Well, you didn't make Michael give a number.
Michael, would you want to answer to that?
Yeah, I would say 8.
8 for the gentleman.
All right. Well, I don't want to get into trouble, so I'm going to say the score I give will be from me, not Grab. I will give actually an 8.5 because I do see some really extraordinary things happening right now. Anecdotally, during the pandemic, I've been ordering everything on Amazon, as everybody has been, and half of it is made in China. The other half are mainly made in Vietnam, including an outdoor couch that is coming in tomorrow. And I'm very, very impressed too with the quality, everything about it. And I do recall actually 3 years ago, before COVID, I visited Vietnam and I just went on the road to interview young people there. I went into this house, and this young person's house doesn't even have AC or fan. It's very, very simple. He's not even middle class, but he has all these Doc Marten boots and leather jackets. And so I asked him, how can you afford all this stuff? You know, and he said, I have this online Facebook marketplace account where I trade these high value leather items, and there's constantly demand, and I flip a few every single week. And he's very proud about it. And I thought, wow, these are people, young people that have a lot of grit and entrepreneurship instincts. And just now, you know, Mike also mentioned the leapfrogging skills, right? You have 3 cell phones. You might not have an AC at home or a car, but you have 3 cell phones and you can do so much with it. So going back to the Biden administration right now, I think, you know, with VP Kamala Harris visiting Singapore and Vietnam, this is very, very much welcome. And I think that the administration right now that is so willing to build and strengthen ties with allies around the world, including Southeast Asia, is very beneficial for us, and especially promising for businesses and startups in the region who are keen to explore this type of linkage with the US, because this will have a spillover effect on consumers, the economic multiplier effect, and also the talent multiplier effect where, you know, the mafia we mentioned, they can cross-pollinate, they can learn, they can seed businesses. So I think it is in everyone's interest in the region in Southeast Asia to see this relationship with the US improving. But I think that as tech firms, we just can't control or shape what politics will be like. It can be very unpredictable. So my one ending note on this is I think we can all do better if we focus on serving our population and how we can, as Southeast Asian countries, solve our own social problems and grow our own talent and not be competition focused or worrying about what other countries want or don't want us to do, but really focusing on growing this 670 million people here, solve the gaps, bring invisible people to the visible economy, financial inclusion, and create these multiplier effects that can help people flourish.
Oh, thanks, Hilaria. So great to hear that we have a good sense of optimism across the 3 panelists. So with that, I would like to open it up for Q&A. Maybe I can start to see whether we have any questions from people in the room. Anyone? If not, I do have as I mentioned just now, I do have a question from someone virtually. So Novia Andayani has this question about how the investment in digitizing economy can significantly contribute to greener environment, and what are the roles of tech companies in this movement? So anyone want to? Oh.
Actually, thank you. I think my question was very similar.
Sure.
You know, you've spoken a lot about the digital future and the growth that's going to come from the digital economy in ASEAN. You know, like what Mr. Tan mentioned in the last panel, the embedded carbon or the emerging carbon footprint of digitalization, you know, is not fully dealt with. And I know some of you are working hard to make your businesses net zero. So it'll be great to understand you know, where are you going with this as we grow the digital economy? Because, you know, it could become a high carbon digital economy.
No, thanks very much for that. So I don't know yeah. Michael?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question, and it's something that I've certainly been engaged in quite a bit in the last couple of years. You know, 5 years ago, I would have never been representing Huawei talking about green, sustainable technology, but in the last couple of years, it's become very much a forefront issue. And I think we have to put it in the right perspective. It's very easy at like a 10,000 foot level to look at technology and look at the total carbon footprint of what technology does and say, you know, it's increasing. How do we manage this? But I think we need to frame it a little bit differently. I'm not saying that we don't still need to tackle that problem. Certainly we do. But I think we need to look at the efficiency of the technology that we have. So for example, you can't just look at the amount of data stored in a data center and say there's a certain green or carbon footprint associated with that. You have to imagine how that data is used or stored more effectively to make other value chain efficiencies through a variety of vertical industries. So for example, whether it's as simple as connecting light bulbs in your home, you might think, well, there's a carbon footprint for putting all those things on the internet, and that is true. But if we can now use that light switching in a more efficient way, so that based on time of day, based on whether or not somebody's home, we can save on energy costs. If we process that through the right cloud environments and artificial intelligence, I think what we'll actually find is that our use of data is increasingly more efficient. So we need to take that into perspective and also consider that these technologies are not just increasing our carbon footprint, they're actually optimizing our use of energy. At the larger end of the scale, of course, we still need to invest more in sustainable energy. And I think there's a lot of technology and quite frankly, politics we can do to encourage people to use that. For example, if you buy an EV or if you put solar PV cells on your roof, do you get some kind of an incentive or a tax rebate from the government? Are the systems designed to allow me to send that back to the grid if I'm not using the energy I'm creating? We need to kind of go from a model. It's really not that different than where we were with data about 10 years ago, where everybody was consuming data through video streaming or file downloads. Now there's a lot more producers. So for example, someone that has a smartphone is no longer just watching a YouTube video. Now they're actually filming themselves, maybe on TikTok, and uploading that content. And likewise in the energy space, I think we need to empower people to also be producers of energy in more effective ways and build a system that actually accommodates that and allows for more free trade of energy across the entire grid.
No, thanks, Michael. Ben, Larry, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, just a short comment from me. Look, I think this is something that has been, very much at the forefront of our minds for a long period of time. We made some commitments in 2007 as it related to carbon neutrality, and just to give a very, very short response on how we're thinking about it in Singapore. We have 2 data centers here. We have a 3rd launching soon, and we work with SemCorp actually, and deploy machine learning to optimize solar energy such that we can achieve some very, very aggressive goals for 2030. So yeah, very much at the forefront of our minds. We are moving that over into real world action, and we have partnerships in play in all the countries that we operate in from a data center standpoint.
Thanks, Ben. Ilaria, anything from you?
Sure. Of course, people will look to us since we are a mobility platform. So over the years, we have taken steps to reduce our environmental footprint, such as investing over $200 million to build up the number of electric vehicles and hybrids in our car rental fleet in Singapore and Indonesia, as well as we have also saved close to 380 million sets of single-use plastic cutlery from being used in 2020. However, there's still so much more to be done to get us even close to a net zero carbon future. So this is really something that we're focusing on next year in 2022, look at many more science-based numbers so that we can concretely get there. I will emphasize actually that, I think Michael made a good point. It is easy from 10,000 feet to say we need all these numbers and goals and all of that. But I just completed a 6-week driving trip across America with my husband, and I wanted to buy a car earlier this year, and I did not go with an electric vehicle. And the reason is that there are not enough charging stations in the United States. So I know I will be stuck somewhere in the middle of Ohio with no electricity for my car, and I wouldn't know what to do. That's why I ended up buying a gas car instead. And we're in USA, the center of Tesla and all this EV innovation. So think about Southeast Asia. Actually, we still have a lot of infrastructure development that has yet to come. We have to solve congestion issues, road issues, charging, the temperature. How does that affect the EV battery? And it requires a very strong public-private partnership to solve these issues. Are we building charging stations in the right area to support the power? What are drivers going to do when they have to wait 45 minutes to charge their car, especially in areas like Manila, Jakarta, where congestion is just paralyzing? All these unfortunately cannot be solved overnight, but a lot of us are actively trying to solve it, and we invite everyone in the audience to join us because it is a multi-pronged issue, and we know it's very urgent, so we are definitely very focused on it.
Thanks, Ilaria. With that rallying call, I'd like to wrap up this panel discussion. I hope we found the session to be interesting and relevant as I have did. And maybe I'd like to invite all of you to put your hands together and thank the panelists for their time and their insights. Thank you.